no regrets, no confusion. There'll be no pollution. I'm so thankful I've decided to change my ways.
Happy Pride, happy Pride, happy Pride. It is the best day of the year. And welcome back to the Leaving Eden podcast. Sadie, why is it the best day of the year?
It is the best day of the year because today is the Leaving Eden drag brunch with Dinah House-Fire. This is one of my favorite yearly traditions, probably my favorite yearly tradition that we have on the podcast.
Dinah House-Fire is going to be joining myself. My name is Gabrielle Hacohen, and my BFF and co-host today, Sadie Carpenter, here on the Leaving Eden podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun. What we are talking about today, the last few years when we've had Dinah come on for the Leaving Eden drag brunch, we've kind of had sort of just like, oh, we're shooting this kind of episode. Now I think we have a much more specific topic that we're talking about.
So I wanted to talk about this topic, and I thought it might take up part of an episode, and then we would have, more just casual hangout jokes and the stuff we normally do when Dinah's around. But then we just kept going, and this topic ended up taking up an entire episode, and I am so glad that it did. We had a really meaningful conversation.
So we're talking about the origin of purity culture, and also this book that I never read, but that I guess if you were raised fundy or raised evangelical was like a ubiquitous book called Through Gates of Splendor.
Yeah, I'll explain it all when we get to the main episode. It is very LGBTQ related. It is very purity culture related. I think it's incredibly worth looking into.
We recorded the actual meat of the episode yesterday, this interview or this guest appearance from Dinah yesterday. It was a very fascinating conversation that we had. But before we get into that, the Leaving Eden podcast is the podcast about my BFF and co-host Sadie Carpenter's life in and escape from the independent fundamental Baptist cult, the cult in which she was raised. We talk about this cult, we talk about other cults, we talk about religion, we talk about fundamentalism, we talk about the real and present threat cults and cult ideologies pose to society as a whole. And it is our goal to promote freedom of mind, freedom of thought, and freedom of religion. So if you like our show, if you're a fan of our show, there's numerous things that you can do in order to support us. Join that Patreon at patreon.com/Leaving Eden podcast, where we have extended and uncensored and ad-free versions of most of our episodes. You can join our subreddit and our Facebook group. Both of those are called Eden Exodus. So you go into Reddit or you go into Facebook, you search Eden Exodus, it should pop right up. And as always, the easiest way that you can support the show is by sharing it with your friends, your family, your coworkers, your enemies, your acquaintances, your pediatrician, your dietitian, or whatever it is that you're having a doctor for. I'm sorry, my brain is fried right now. It's the day after the NBA draft, and I was up very late last night watching the Trailblazers draft Scoot Henderson. Welcome to Rip City, Scoot. My brain is fried.
I kind of like that. I feel like we should make a new list of people that you can tell about our podcast for every episode now.
Yeah, you can tell your father, you can tell your son, and you can tell your Holy Spirit. I'm just, oy vey. Man, is there, we have new merch available. We have the Pride merch still available. As always, year round, if you buy Pride merch, then that, the proceeds for that go to support LGBTQ community. During Pride, we like to upload a couple new Pride themed designs. So we have some new Pride themed designs going out. We also are going to have some new merch designs going out next month for our Summer of Satan episode series, when we're going to be talking about the Satanic Panic. We're going to be talking about Jack Chick. We're going to be talking about rock and roll being from the devil again. A lot of fun. We're going to be talking about Bob Larson. We're going to be talking about the Chick comics, and we're going to be talking about conspiracy theories. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so watch for that coming next month.
I'm so excited about Summer of Satan.
Yeah, Summer of Satan was Sadie's idea. When she suggested, I'm just like, yes.
I think we're going to have about 4 or 5 weeks. We'll see how the episodes stretch out, but we'll have about 4 or 5 weeks of Satanic Panic related content.
It's pretty exciting. It's honestly, I love talking about Satanic Panic. And I think that's it. We just have to thank our patrons.
Okay.
Yeah. So do you want to thank the patrons? Do you want me to thank the patrons?
I would love to thank the patrons.
I would also love to thank the patrons, but I will let you have the opportunity this
It's
week.
Pride Month, Gavi. So our I Gave It All patrons are Kathleen Moncrief, Melissa Mosley, and Todd Dale on behalf of Madeline Antrim. Welcome, Todd and Madeline, to our I Gave It All tier. Our Faith Promise Missions tier patrons are Alex P., Alicia Guild, Allie Allen, Anisha Patel, Ashley Doxtater, Brooke Tully, Krissa, Crystal Patterson, Dear Ethan Hansen the Musical, Dora J., Eleanor Donahue, Enchanted Fairy, Esther M., Hannah Ross, Hope Norum, Horton Hears a Shane, Janine Callan, Jen Kuharski, Jessica Tambo, Jonna, Justin, Kat Hinwood, Kate Wee, Kitty Kate, Kristen Marie, Learned Vixen. Oh, I think that person. Oh, they've changed their name. Okay. Linda
Learned
Morgan.
Vixen.
This is somebody who's they've changed their screen name.
If you change your screen name, then we have to read it, whatever it says. So
That
have
is
fun with that.
That is not correct. we are
We're obligated by God to read the
that is
whatever
not
people.
no, that is not true. No. We are we offer to read anything that you put in your screen name field, but reserve the right to reject reading screen names allowed on air at the sole discretion of Leaving Eden Podcast LLC and its subsidiaries.
Yeah, so you can't say anything like offensive or
Yeah.
offensive but not funny.
That's it. You can't say anything that's offensive and not funny.
Yeah.
Linda Morgan, Lindsay Goss, Lorena Watson, Madeline Antrim, Madeline Cusick, Marlena Stuve, Marcia Millard, Mary Williams, Mary Martin, Megan Arndt, Rob the Methodist, Sarah Reese, Stephanie Johnson, Susie, Tara McNamara, the Loch Ness, Tiffany Enderby, and as always, Wes the Cowboy.
Thank you, Wes the Cowboy.
And to all of our I Gave It All tier and Faith Promise Missions tier patrons, and to everyone who supports us over on Patreon, we truly appreciate you so much. Can we do our trigger warning and get into this amazing interview? In general, we talk about a lot of potentially triggering topics on this show, including but not limited to suicide and mental health, racism, misogyny, PTSD and PTSD symptoms, child abuse, mental, physical, and sexual abuse, and spiritual abuse, including guilt, shame, and fear. In most episodes, we will mention at least a few of these topics, but we try to avoid graphic detail unless it's relevant to the story that we're telling, and we do our very best to give you a heads up before any of that sort of detail comes up. This episode broadly discusses homophobia in Christian culture, colonialism, mission work. We also do talk about like people's repressed sexuality, and we do a very measured, very careful speculation into people's sexuality on this episode. That's not something we typically do. We will explain fully like our methodology and why we think this is appropriate when we get to the episode. But those are the things to keep your eyes open for in this episode.
Thank you so much for that. And without further ado, let's get into it with Dinah. Rolling. New metal's back.
Why do you never do Rolling Down the River?
Honestly,
Rolling.
R.I.P. Tina.
R.I.P. Tina, a legend.
This is Drag Brunch, and we are in the year of Tina Turner's passing. I feel like it's disrespectful not to do Rolling Down the River.
You should always be rolling down the river.
A big wheel keep on turning. Proud Mary keep on burning. All right.
Well,
we are here with Dinah House-Fire.
No, let me do it. I have an intro.
Oh, she prepared
Sadie has
something.
an intro. Sadie,
Okay.
give us your intro.
Yeah, okay. Well, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone else, we are here rolling down the river with the lovely, fantastic Dinah House-Fire.
Hello.
Welcome back, Dinah.
Hi, thank you. Glad to be back.
It's the Leaving Eden Drag Brunch, y'all.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Because as this episode comes out, it will still be Pride Month for another like 3 or 4 or 5 days or whatever. And we think that's something that's worth celebrating.
How has your Pride Month been? Miss Dinah?
My Pride Month has been good. I've been working drag gigs a good bit this month,
Hell yeah.
which is always fun. Got to do drag bingo the other day, which was a lot of fun. I've actually never called bingo before, so that was new. But it was like they had the big rolly thing and the basket, and the ball falls out, and it was a whole thing. But yeah, no, my Pride has been really good. I have felt like I've felt more like visibly participating in Pride this year, and I don't exactly know why that is, but I've been wearing my rainbow Apple Watch band and my rainbow Crocs and just living out loud.
There's a lot to maybe be proud of this year in Arkansas. I know it's been a really tough year for LGBT people down there, but there was recently a little bit of a legal victory, I think.
Yes, thank God. So Arkansas, there's the whole thing where ALEC is kind of behind all the legislation going around in conservative places. But there was a bill that actually got passed that was to ban gender affirming treatment to any minor. And I believe it was regardless of parent consent. So it was just like no to any trans kids, basically. But thankfully, I think it was this week, there was a permanent injunction placed against that legislation. So it cannot go into place. So
Thank God.
thank
Oh,
God,
yeah.
because they're just trying to make trans people not exist. And that's not going to happen. And also, the way to make that happen is really, really, really sad.
Yeah, and I mean that law would literally have killed children.
Yeah.
Which is f***ed up. Yeah, you can't do that.
I really like
man.
to see victories and resistance in places that are so hostile to LGBTQ people, because I think that puts people like me who live in a more progressive area on notice.
Right.
Like, hey, these people where it is so much more of a fight can make real change.
Yeah.
So what are you doing?
And I'll say, God bless the ACLU for all that they've been doing in sort of helping with push through against this legislation. There's also an organization called Intransitive, and they are sort of our Arkansas, specifically trans community watchdogs, and they've done a really good job of community organizing down here.
Yeah, I mean it is easy for Sadie or me to I don't want to say talk the talk, because like that makes it seem like that makes it seem kind of like weak. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But like I mean, I live like probably 2-3 blocks away from me is a neighborhood in Philadelphia called the Gayborhood, which is like and there's like rainbows painted on the streets and rainbows painted on the signs and everything. And it's easy, here for me to be like, yes, I support the LGBTQ community. And everyone's like, thumbs up. And
right. It's like, okay.
Where you are, man. Ooh, oy vey.
I will say, living in Little Rock is a little different than most of the rest of the state, because it's slightly more urban, and it's a lot more diverse. And so we have, like, Little Rock swings slightly left of moderate as a whole, which is good. But I didn't grow up here, and so I know what those other parts of the state are all about, and so that is scarier. Because thankfully, I teach at a high school here, and it is sort of majority people of color, but also very, very open to the LGBTQ community. And I mean, we're an arts school, so there's lots of weirdos, and we love it. But that's not the case for most of the people down. So I'm thankful for the little bubble I live in, but also acknowledge that it is a privilege.
And I'm thankful that some reasonable thinking from within that little bubble seems to be winning the day, at least in the state.
They are working their asses off, and we like to support them any way we can.
Hell yeah.
Well, props to them. Happy Pride to everybody who is working so hard in Arkansas and in other places to continue to make the world a livable place, or make the world a livable place again, as the situation may be.
Right.
For LGBTQ people and for everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Dinah, I sent you an article a couple months back that may have been a bit of a jump scare. Do you remember this article?
I do. I remember this article. I remember reading it and just being like, oh, this is a lot. This is a lot of information I did not anticipate.
Yeah, so I read this article and then I immediately sent it to you, and then I thought, I might should have sent that with the trigger warning.
And it was fine. Like, but no, it was a lot. Like it's heavy, but also it's just super turning a narrative on its head.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I'm so glad you sent it to me.
And I thought this would be an interesting episode to tell the people what we read and maybe what we got from this set of articles that I sent to you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a set of articles containing journal excerpts from Jim and Elizabeth Elliot. Now, Gavi, I imagine that you don't really know who these people are.
I don't. Sadie, when we were talking about what we were going to talk about on this episode, you said we're going to talk about Jim and Elizabeth Elliot, and I'm like, cool. Who's that?
Awesome.
So let me give you the TLDR on that. So Jim Elliot was one of 5 missionaries who attempted to evangelize the Waorani people. The Waorani are a tribe of indigenous people in isolation in Ecuador. So they are people who don't have contact, like, with what we would frame as the outside world, meaning us. Of course, to them, their group is their world, and they
Right.
may not care if they have contact with us.
You could almost frame it like as sort of like pre-Columbian, as very Eurocentric as
Yeah.
that is. Like they have not actually been colonized by any European folks.
They're living the dream.
Right.
And some missionaries tried, and it didn't go very well for them.
Mm-mm.
People listening to this podcast may be familiar with the book Through Gates of Splendor, which was the book that Elizabeth Elliot wrote about her husband's attempt to evangelize, colonize these people. In that book, they are referred to as the Auca Indians, AUCA, but in researching this, I have learned that Auca is a slur and not what these people would want to be called.
Oy vey.
Of course, that's what Christians have been calling them for 70 years now. Of course it is. But their proper name is the Waorani tribe. These 5 missionaries, including Jim Elliot, attempted to evangelize these people by flying over in a small plane, bringing gifts, and then meeting with some of the indigenous people on the beach, giving them more gifts. The whole idea is that they would build a relationship with them and then eventually learn their language and be able to tell them about Jesus, as Ginger Duggar would say.
Speaking of Arkansas.
Hey, at least Josh isn't in the state anymore.
Yeah, your state had some big gains in the last couple of
We
years.
really did, right?
Leading Josh Duggar down to Texas.
Bye.
And Ginger Duggar went to, I guess she's in California now.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Because that's where God is calling her to live.
Convenient.
So that she can go to Nobu every Friday.
Right.
Ain't none of my business.
Back to Jim Elliot. The 5 missionaries that were attempting to evangelize the Waorani probably avoided giving them smallpox, but they did drop photographs, which the Waorani interpreted as being like an evil token, which is understandable when you consider that they had never seen white people or planes or photographs before. So it is very logical that they would think this was bad news. When the missionaries visited again, they were all speared to death on the beach.
I read a little bit about that elsewhere, and I don't want to go too far into it because that's not really the point of where we're going. But I did read that there was some more like contact where they made contact. Of course, they didn't speak the same language, but like some of them were really intrigued, at least according to this article that I read, by the airplane and the fact that people were able to fly. And they gave one guy like a little tour of the area in the airplane and brought him back. And,
Yeah.
like they were trying to have conversations. But that did not sit well with the people, and I mean, possibly rightly so. And I don't want to paint them in a better picture than we are. I mean, they definitely were doing some good old-fashioned colonialism, but I think it goes a little bit further than just like photographs bad. Like, I think there was more interpersonal stuff probably going on.
And these missionaries truly, if you read their journals and you understand that they were willing to give their life for this, they knew that there was a very good chance that they would not make it out of this mission that they were going on. I think it's clear that they truly thought that they were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think the most respectful thing to do is to acknowledge that they truly thought they were doing the best thing, and also make it clear that they were not in any way doing the best thing.
Here's the thing that kind of bothers me, though, is that, like, when I'm thinking back to, like, episode 2 of this podcast, when you were talking about how, well, if somebody's never even heard of Jesus, how can they go to heaven? Because, and I was, and since I've read things since then, there have been people who have said things like, well, God makes an exception where if you would have never had a chance to hear about Jesus, then you never would have had a chance to reject him. So maybe you don't go to hell for that reason. And like, these people, clearly they've never heard of Jesus. And so they're like, now you have a chance to reject Jesus. So now you have a chance to go to hell. That seems like that's kind of fucked up.
Well, but I think, so there is in the New Testament this concept of before the end of the world, or before Jesus comes back, there would be believers of every tongue, tribe, and nation in the world. And so, like, in their minds, they're also trying to hasten the return of the Lord by reaching absolutely every people group.
Right, because that's one of the many things that has to happen in order to make the rapture happen, even though no man knows the day or the hour. And
that's kind of opportunistic, though.
Well, they also believe that nobody knows when it's coming and that God has already chosen a time for it and you can't do anything to influence God's timing. It's one of those catch-22s that you get into when you talk about free will and the Christian concept of salvation and heaven and hell. It's it just goes in circles.
And I mean, you look back at the Great Commission, like it's baked in, go ye therefore. And I come from Baptists that are a little bit different than Sadie's, but like we were landmark Baptists, so we believe that the Baptist church is the true church that goes all the way back to Jesus, and we don't have to go into all of that. But yeah, that was a big thing of like, even though there might be some Christians around, we've got to make sure that absolutely every group has the right kind of Christians, quote unquote.
Oh, pop quiz for Gavi. Do you remember what that concept is called?
Wait, which concept?
The concept that only certain types of Baptist are the true Christians and descended from the early church.
That is Baptist bridalism.
Good job.
There you go.
Good job.
I win.
That's correct.
Do I get an A+? What do I get on my test?
You get a little rainbow flag as a prize.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I want to come back and cover the entire story of Through Gates of Splendor, especially with the new evidence that turned up in some of these articles I read. I want to do like a side-by-side of the story as Elizabeth Elliot told it and the story as was told in their journals and letters, because it seems like there may be some mismatches there. Because it seems that there may be some mismatches between what Elizabeth Elliot preached and what she practiced in a lot of areas of her life. So after Jim's death, Elizabeth became a leading figure in evangelicalism. She became kind of famous just because her husband was, in their conceptualization of things, martyred for Christianity. She had a very young child at the time that he died. She was a very sympathetic figure because, now this woman, they'd only been married like 2 years, and her young husband has just been brutally killed. This is how the Christian press would have said it.
Right.
And she's got this small child, and now she's going to stay in Ecuador to continue evangelizing these people. And she was kind of a perfect figurehead.
Well, it's
a perfect victim.
Exactly.
If you're a
It's like
Christian.
auto martyrdom, maybe. Like she's putting herself there very intentionally to make a point.
Yeah, and she leaned into it super hard by writing not only Through Gates of Splendor, which is the the story of this mission trip and how her husband was killed, but also she wrote tons of other books. And one book that she wrote and a few other follow-ups that she wrote to it may have kind of invented purity culture, actually.
Pew, 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 pew.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So she wrote this book, Passion and Purity. And in this book, she told a version of her Bible college romance with her dead husband, Jim. She talks in that book about how they were so attracted to each other and so in love. And it's so difficult to not have sex with somebody that you're committed to and attracted to, but not get married to. But they did it. And if we did it, so can you. And it was so hard, but we did it. And that's kind of the vibe of that book. This is a quote from Passion and Purity that directly translates to purity culture today.
Oh, hold on 1 second. Dinah, will you turn the vibrate off on your phone? Because every time it vibrates,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Dinah, can you quit using your vibrator? We're trying to have a good discussion about purity
Sorry,
culture.
I got the bullet out and I didn't know.
You just dropped it and it fell on the switch. Happens to all of us.
Thank you for subscribing to our I Gave It All tier of our Patreon. No, I'm just gonna. But this is Pride Month. I'm just gonna put that on regular Patreon.
That's fine.
We've already talked about vibrators on the podcast once this month. So
Happy
with
Pride.
Lindsay.
Yeah, that was fun, man.
So, quote from Passion and Purity. If virginity is to be preserved, lines must be drawn. Why put yourself in any situation where the lines become smudged and obscure? Why take the risks? Why accept the pressure of tremendous temptation when you can easily avoid it by refusing to be anywhere where compromise is possible?
Eve.
So this is something that is incredibly common in modern purity culture. We've talked about the slippery slope analogy where, originally people were told, well, you can kiss, but you can't make out because that's going to lead you to having sex. And then 10 years later, it was, well, don't kiss until your wedding day because that's going to lead you to making out and that's going to lead you to having sex. And then 10 years later, it was, well, don't even hold hands or have any physical contact until your wedding day because slippery slope. I think Elizabeth Elliot may have been one of the first people to publish that.
So we weren't quite as rigid about all the steps and rules. It was mostly don't have sex or you'll get pregnant and die. But we definitely had that same concept of if sex is the line that you can't cross, you should be actively working to stay as far away from that line as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to even have the appearance of anything evil, which would be intimacy. So yeah, we didn't quite do the you can't even hold hands thing, but definitely we knew that we weren't supposed to do anything risque, let's say.
And it appears that Elizabeth Elliot may have been one of the first people to start moving that line back further and further away from sex. She may have also been one of the pioneers of encouraging people to not give pieces of their heart away through dating too much or being too emotionally intimate with people before engagement.
The don't be too emotionally intimate thing is interesting to me. I definitely grew up with the don't give pieces of your heart away idea, which is, as an adult, I look back and I go, well, I mean, yeah, don't throw your love around, but also love multiplies. It doesn't divide. So that's weird. But you would think that you would want people to be emotionally very involved with one another if they are going to, in fact, be married and then have sex.
In the IFB, it was kind of engagement or getting real close to engagement was kind of that line, which is how we had all those additional rules about the I like you phase and the I love you phase and the engagement phase and what you could and couldn't talk about and all of those different phases. That was intended as a don't give pieces of your heart away thing.
The I like you phase, the I like you phase as a concept is really to me.
I'm telling you, dude, you could go drive to Crown Point, Indiana right now and walk through the drool pool. It's about 3 PM in Indiana. and you would hear grown adult couples who are old enough to drink, drive, and vote sitting in the drool pool, staring deeply into each other's eyes, whispering, I like you.
Vom.
I like you too. I am telling you could go there right now and hear it.
It
So
makes my
fascinating.
hair stand up on end to hear you talk about that, Sadie. It truly
Well,
does.
you know what? You know what you did to me with the Ben Shapiro voice in the episode that's coming out next week. You can take
Yeah.
it.
I like you.
No. No.
Technically, if you never, ever, ever go even close to having sex,
Oh my God.
then you will maintain your purity forever. I know this because my wife, who is a doctor, Clearly.
Oh my God. Make it stop.
And this
Sadie,
is
make it
Elizabeth
stop.
Elliot's fault.
How did
So-
Ben Shapiro and Elizabeth Elliot find each other?
Elizabeth Elliot did this.
Jim Elliot died on a beach in Ecuador. And then it's like the domino meme where it's Jim Elliot dying on a beach in Ecuador and getting speared to death. And then 50 years later, it's bring a bucket and a mop for a wet ass P word. Just like,
and then here we are across the country from one another talking about it.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Talk about the dominoes.
And it's all because Elizabeth Elliot wrote all of these books that were highly idealized versions of her own love story that she spun in the years following her husband's death. These books made her famous and they got her respect in evangelical circles that is rarely afforded to women today and was even more rarely afforded to women 70 years ago, 60 years ago. She told this story in her books of a, quote, tornado of passion
Ooh.
that Jim and Elizabeth, by the grace of God, managed to keep under lock and key until their wedding night.
Wait, is the tornado of passion the thing that that Mariah Mills was tweeting about with Zion Williamson?
I thought Tornado of Passion was the new ride at Six Flags St. Louis.
I thought it's what we call when I leave my phone on vibrate.
Oh my God.
So the thing is, this is the story that she spun. But not only does her own story not line up in the different books in which she tells it, but the journals and letters from their courtship also don't line up with the story that she told in her books.
A twist.
See, that's the thing. Every time you see somebody who makes their personal life into like content, which is essentially what she's doing, like, but they didn't call it content back then, or she's basically just monetizing her personal life. The reality never lines up with what actually happens. Like 99.99% of the time, there's no couple who has that, who does that, whose lives are actually as idyllic as they portray.
Well, I was going to say, even things that, like, outside of the world of this sort of proto-influencer, which is kind of what she was, you can look at other authors like that wrote about their own lives, like Laura Ingalls Wilder. Her real life story is not Little House on the Prairie. It's worthwhile to then go back and compare those notes and see, like, oh, okay, I can see why they said this, or I can see why they would have said that, whether it's a good thing or not. And then go, but this is what's really going on.
The key difference there, I think, is that Little House on the Prairie is a work of fiction.
True.
And was marketed as semi-autobiographical fiction.
Yeah. As opposed to what Elizabeth Elliot was doing.
Yeah, because what she ended up doing was being one of the premier voices on sexuality and Christian dating, as much as I hate that phrase. So when I say that their journals and letters tell a different story, they tell a different story to the extent that some people have speculated that Jim, or both Jim and Elizabeth, may have not been straight, and perhaps this was a marriage of convenience situation or a beard situation. I want to dig into the actual quotes and then give my analysis, because I think that the oh my God, what if he was gay, is the tip of the iceberg of the value of this story. Like, I don't find, like, speculating on some dead guy's sexuality is not typically what we would do on this podcast. I am promising that I am going somewhere much deeper with this. So I'm going to jump into quite a few of these quotes from the journals, and y'all break in if you need any clarification or have anything to say.
Go for it.
Jim, upon meeting Elizabeth, described her in a letter to his parents as a tall, lean girl, far from beautiful. In another letter, he says that he likes her not on account of a fine-featured face, a shapely form, nor even on account of rare conversational powers. Of the former two, she possesses little of appeal.
Yikes.
And he called her ugly to her face. Like, he used kind of nice language to do it, but he made it very clear to her and everyone around him, his family, his close friends, that he did not find her physically attractive.
That sucks.
It really does.
And this was in his journals also, that she found after his death, which sucks.
Can you imagine?
I
Like, if you're
want to
going,
look at what this woman looks like.
I mean, she's not conventionally beautiful, but I can look at her and go, oh yeah, somebody who was in love with her could absolutely see her as beautiful.
What does she look?
I mean,
She's got a very radiant smile.
I see the only thing that I'm looking her up right now. Okay, here she is young. I mean, she has like a gap in her front teeth, and that's
I was
it.
gonna say.
That's like the only. That's the only feature about her that I'm like.
And a lot of people think gap teeth are cute.
I think she's relatively average.
She looks like a very regular person.
Yeah.
And not in like a bad way. Like this.
Yeah. And plenty of regular people and average looking people have partners who look at them and believe that they're the most beautiful person in the world.
That's true.
And people who are in love tend to be physically attracted to their partner no matter what that partner looks like.
And also, like, even if your partner isn't somebody who is like conventionally like the Instagram butt model looking person, then you still find things that you find out about this person that you're like, that is the thing that does it for me. You know, it's very like, I mean, like, man, I can't imagine marrying somebody and ever writing down where they could find it. I don't think this person is attractive. That's crazy to me.
What is
like
to do?
Yeah, that
right. And
no.
like, he wrote those first two things in letters to his parents. So like, what a way to introduce your parents. The second one was, I think, after they were engaged. So
also,
that's great.
Who
but also
writes like that? Of
Jim
the
Elliot.
former two, she possesses little of appeal. Who writes like that?
What the
He's got a lot of friends who are like English majors, including one very close personal friend who is an English major who was writing his doctoral thesis on a book with like very heavy, what would you call it? A very
Overtones.
Gay book.
Yeah.
It's a very gay book.
Like homoerotic overtones.
That's the one. Yeah. Who was like a very close friend of Jim Elliot's. Their journals and letters to each other and friends don't just speak of not being highly attracted to each other. They also speak of a lot of emotional upheaval about their relationship. Jim wrote in his journal about a belief that God had called him to be a eunuch for the kingdom of God, and that he would never be married and remain celibate.
Which is what Paul told us to do.
Right. But was not normal in his denomination.
Well.
And he wrote about whether God sending him Elizabeth was a test of that calling. He also wrote, both before and after their marriage, about some kind of sexual urges that he believed to be impure. So here's a quote from his journal. "Lord, thou must put an end to my fleshly issue. Stop it, Lord. Staunch the flow of this defilement which springs from rotten flesh." And then in another entry, I think this one is after their marriage. "I cannot for the life of me understand my heart. Somewhere down deep in the murky pools of consciousness, there is a great monster whom I will name Want for just now. This is the only constant thing about me, desire. Much to Freud's consternation, I cannot name it sex urge, for I have found that such will not glut the maw of the brute. He demands more of a varied diet, and one not so easily obtained as that either. I
Wait,
have
so varied diet. That means like
varied diet. There is a desire in me that sex with my wife does not satisfy.
Right. And yeah.
So he is certainly potentially referring to a desire to have extramarital affairs with other women.
Or he could just be like, she just wants mish every time.
Sure.
Or he feels dirty about jacking it. It could be lots of different things.
But one not so easily obtained as that either.
Yeah.
Something that's not as easy to get as sex with his wife. Whatever this unnamed temptation was, Jim says that he had to, quote, steel myself to sex in the face of it. So he couldn't get this, whatever this thing was that he wanted, so he was trying to just have sex with his wife and make that enough. And he goes back and forth, like even in his final days, about whether he should confess to his wife what he is going through. Even in actually his last journal entry. And Elizabeth had published his quote-unquote last journal entry, but she actually published the second to last one, which was much more spiritual. In his actual last entry, he is going back and forth on, should I tell her, like, before I potentially go die? But Jim wasn't the only one talking about some kind of unwanted desire. Elizabeth wrote, quote, I cannot write it even here. O God, purge me, take away all desire.
Interesting.
That sounds familiar.
Sounds very familiar. Like it's almost the same.
That sounds familiar.
It's almost the same verbiage.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand this though, like as someone who has, hidden my sexuality in years past and gender and all those things, like I get it. I get that pleading with God to take it away and make me, not have this burden anymore. I think I talk about the Apostle Paul and his thorn in the flesh possibly being his sexuality. But yeah, when I was a teenager especially, like this would have been the stuff that would keep me up nights and I would write it in my journal. So I guess like it tracks. Like all of this feels very familiar.
This is not proof that either one of them was not straight. But it certainly sounds like the journal entries of a million queer kids who have grown up in religious fundamentalism. A lot like it.
So I have a question. So if you're a queer kid, you're growing, like, are you writing, I think I'm attracted to other men, I think I might be gay, I think I have same-sex attraction, or are you writing, I have urges that are not what God wants from me, and this is a temptation, and I need to.
For me, I think I was writing. So generally for me, when I was journaling, I was writing as prayers, and sort of it was like a way to sort of meditate and pray. And so I would be more or less writing letters to God of like, I think I usually tried to be relatively polite about the content that I would put in there. Like I wouldn't put like explicit things in there because you don't talk about things like that. But I would have been writing like, I felt an attraction for so and so, or I'm struggling with an addiction to pornography, which apparently every fundamentalist teen boy has, because we have to call it an addiction because we can't control it.
Right.
Whereas, like, as a human being person now, like, I realize, oh, you're just a kid and you're curious about sex because no one teaches you anything.
Yeah, and your hormones are...
And you're just horny. Yeah.
And your hormones are wild, and this is a normal part of being that age.
Exactly. I mean, to call back to our first time speaking, like, crack a blanket in half. Like, it just is what happens at that age.
So, and to answer another part of your question, Gabi, I think putting it in these kind of slightly obscured terms is very normal, especially because there's a lack of privacy in fundamentalism, you're expected to have accountability partners and prayer buddies and all of these different things. And also, these people were living in dorms with other people. Jim knew that he was going on a mission where he was very likely to be killed, so he maybe knew that somebody would probably read his journal after he died. A lot of these things are written in letters as well. So, yeah, to kind of obscure what exactly this great sin that you're struggling with is very, very normal. But most often when you get this kind of vague terminology about a sin, it's something to do with sex.
Yeah.
Because if you were struggling with stealing, you would write stealing. If you were struggling with the sin of listening to rock music, you would write that. If it's obscure, it is something sexual.
So, okay, so there's no, like, they wouldn't be writing whatever the Christianese version of gay is.
No.
They would be...
Especially
okay,
not in the
sense to me then.
1950s. Like, these letters and journals are from the 40s and 50s. So terms like SSA are not really used.
That's what I was exactly going to say. Like, that's what I might have possibly said. I'm struggling with temptation of same-sex attraction or something like that. But generally, no. Like, and we hide a lot behind this sort of Christianese way of speaking. And also, like, there's a lot of, like, buzzwordy things that I'm seeing here that are very churchy. So, oh God, purge me feels right. Like, that feels like, yes, something that I would say.
So if he's saying, oh God, purge me, it has to be something bad enough that he's like, I can't deal with this on my own.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense to me than...
It's like asking God to physically cut a part of who you are out of you because you think this part of you is so sinful and horrible that you cannot even bear to name it.
Right.
Dinah, why do you do this to me? Every time I talk to you, I get in this, like, highly intense mental state.
Sorry.
I love you.
Because
it's okay.
I love you too. We vibe. It's cool. No, I was thinking about it in the sense of, like, you purge. So to purge is to, like, get rid of, right? But also, and I don't know why this is in my brain, but it's because I'm in the South and crawfish. But, like, you purge shellfish before you eat it. Like, you have to clean out all the grit and the dirt and the everything from their intestines and all of that before you cook them.
Oh yeah, more stuff that we have to explain to Gavi.
I know. I'm sorry. It's shellfish. It's, you know.
It's okay. I think he's allowed to talk about it, just not eat it.
Yeah. No. But, like, there's a whole system for, like, putting them in clean water and changing the water and until it is completely clean and, you know, nothing is left. Or with shrimp, like, you cut you devein them or whatever. Like, but it's a pretty violent system of like cleaning. It's like literally, you know, take the grit out of me, take the bad things out of me.
And that's an intense prayer. Asking God to purge you is a very intense feeling. I don't think that's the kind of prayer that you would pray for a sin that you thought you could just quit doing.
Yeah.
Okay. I thanks for explaining that to me. I just didn't have the context for not growing up in this. I don't understand what the
yeah, and this is kind of a deep cut too. So okay. I'm glad to have Dinah for backup here. Let's take a look at one other piece of evidence. So Jim wrote this about his close friend Bill. This is not the guy who was writing the homoerotic doctoral thesis. This is a different guy. Quote, "The love of David and Jonathan felt again today for Bill C. upon receipt of a letter from him en route to China. How great shall be our fellowship in heaven. Oh, to spend eternity with such whose spirit quickens my own, makes me throb just to hear his soul's surgings."
Yo, that is gay as
Anytime there's throbbing, it's automatically gay.
Throbbing David and Jonathan. Jesus.
And David and Jonathan and spirits quicken my own and soul's surgings. All in 2 sentences.
Quicken means erection, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it brings to life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh.
But yes, I think in this case, erection.
There is plausible deniability that a straight guy who's a fundy could write this about another straight guy who's a fundy because he's clueless? That it is possible.
David and Jonathan were roommates who were buried together, and they were best
They were
friends.
best friends. So I have to point out, this could be written by a straight fundy guy about another straight fundy guy. I don't think it's very likely, but it is possible. Here's something that was written.
Can I make a note on that real quick?
Oh, please.
Potentially, was Bill C. So he was en route to China. Had he been to China previously? Because they do have gay demons.
Oh, maybe he had a gay demon.
Because that would make sense. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that would.
Did he get any rings when he was in the in Ecuador?
Ooh,
that is a good question.
A very good
even
question.
Though all of this happened long before Ecuador. I want to read one other letter. This is from Elizabeth's close friend, Eleanor Vandevort, who went by Van her whole life, never married, dressed in a very masculine fashion, and lived with Elizabeth for quite a few years after Elizabeth came home from Ecuador. They lived in Vermont together.
Vermont.
Eleanor Vandevort is the most lesbian ass name I've ever heard in my life.
And going by Van. Also, that's awfully close to Boston is all I'm saying.
Well, wait till you hear this letter. Okay, so here's the letter. Your picture thrills me every time I look at it, and I just wish for one more time to see you and talk with you. What will it be to be together forever? I am coming to know what the opposite of it means, and the greatness of it makes me wait eagerly for the fulfillment of the eternal state.
They're literally like, I can't wait to die and so that we can go to heaven forever, and just like...
Yeah. So both of them, so that letter is actually from Eleanor to Elizabeth, but both of them are having these both of them have incredibly close same-sex friendships, ? In which they speak passionately about longing for death, because then we will be together forever in heaven, and that will be so wonderful, and I can't bear to be apart from you, and I can't wait to die so I can never say goodbye to you again.
So,
which is kind of a lot.
That is a lot.
I was a very queer kid growing up in fundamentalism, and I had friends who were like missionary kids and would go around the world, and I would write them letters, and even I wasn't writing something like that.
Right. And I'm just thinking, like, it's very healthy to have friends of the same gender and to be able to express your love for them in a healthy way and like This does not feel like that. Like, my best friend and I will tell each other that we love each other, and it's all well and good, and we'll hug or whatever, but I'm not throbbing to hear his soul surgings. I'm just like, hey, you want to have brunch or whatever? Like, will you help me move? Let's hang out and watch a movie. Like, it's, and that doesn't mean that we don't love each other, and we do, but it's not this, whatever this is.
Ugh.
And I am gay.
Since we've sent these, since we came out with the episode, especially last week's episode where we had Megan on, and Megan was talking about figuring out that she was bisexual when she was in like her 30s, 40s. We've had like emails, Instagram messages, Facebook from people being like, oh, I realized that this friendship that I had with somebody who I went to high school with was a lot more than a friendship. On my end, at least, there were feelings from my end that were a lot stronger than friendship, and I didn't know that was what I was like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had a couple people message me like, oh,
right.
I just realized. I have one more big bombshell. I think we should go take up the offering, and when we come back, I will tell you about it.
Sounds good.
Hey, Sadie here. If this is your first time listening to the Leaving Eden podcast, make sure you go back and check out episode 57. It's a primer episode for new listeners. That episode tells my personal story and gives you all the terms and information that you'll need to know going forward. Also, check out our cult true crime series, The First Family of Fundamentalism, so that you can get the whole cult story. If you like our show, you can support us by joining our Patreon, where we have extended and uncensored episodes as well as other bonus content available. You can also join in the discussion in our Facebook group. That group is called Eden Exodus. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell your worst enemy. The Leaving Eden podcast is a fully independent podcast, and we really appreciate your support. Now, back to the show.
So we are back from our break. We are talking about the truth behind Elizabeth Elliot's myth-making about herself and her dead husband. So I've read you all of these little snippets from mostly journals, but also personal letters that were sent to and from Jim and Elizabeth to each other, to other people, etc. And there's one thing that I haven't told you about these journals.
Oh.
So Elizabeth's journals have only been published in excerpts in her own books to illustrate the stories she's telling. They have never been published in full, and they are considered lost. There is a rumor that they were burned.
Convenient.
Jim's journals are available at Wheaton College. You can actually go and check them out in their library and see them like in their rare books room. But before their donation to Wheaton, they had been heavily censored by Elizabeth with a pair of scissors.
Ooh.
Are you going to make the joke?
They are. You are, because I missed it.
There's one thing lesbians know how to do. It's scissor.
These journals
sorry,
are shredded. But I can put a picture up on our Instagram. I'm sure that both of you saw the picture in the article.
Mm-hmm.
She left in the parts where her husband was calling her ugly.
Yeah. What on earth did she cut out?
Yeah.
The butt stuff.
Right? Especially the second half of his last journal before his death is what really appears to be the most cut up. You have to look at the picture. There are pages where half the page is gone. And it is, when you read through it, it does appear that all of the parts that have been cut are intimate in some way. So there's a blogger who has put all of this together, and this blogger came to the conclusion that, well, both Jim and Elizabeth were something other than straight. He hypothesized maybe Jim was a gay man and she might have been asexual, just based on other things that she wrote that I didn't put in this episode, but that their marriage was a sham to make them acceptable. They got married quickly because a position opened in Ecuador for missionaries, but the position was only for a married couple.
And in having read the blog posts and things, it seemed like she might have been interested in being married to him. He didn't seem all that interested in being married at all, or especially to her. That was what I picked up anyway.
You said that exactly right, because his interest, number one, he was not interested in being married at all.
Right.
And number two, a distant number two, he was not very interested in being married to her.
Which is maybe why he feels okay saying that she's ugly.
Yeah.
Also, as if you're a woman who is growing up in fundamentalism, you're told get married, get married, get married, get married, get married,
and then have kids, have kids, have kids, have kids, have kids. Yep.
That's what you're here for. You're here to get, your whole life is building up to when you get married.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand, if you're not even particularly interested in sex or interested in that, then you would still see getting married as the thing that you have to do to take the next step in your life.
And then this job came up that they both desperately wanted, and the job was for a couple. And that was the primary reason why they got married when they did.
And I could even see being a fundamentalist and saying, well, clearly, I didn't think I was built for this, but God put this in front of me and God gave me this opportunity, and clearly it's a sign.
That is almost identical to some things that he wrote in his journals. Like when he was talking about, well, I thought God had called me to be a eunuch for the kingdom, but now I have this opportunity. Is this a test? And what is the answer that God wants from me? Does God want me to prove my commitment to being celibate, or does God want me to take this opportunity and get married? So the blogger sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the Apostle Paul stuff just keeps dinging in my brain, saying that he would be a eunuch for the kingdom. Gavi, I don't know about you, but I've never once thought maybe I should be a eunuch.
Nope.
But I know, Paul talked about being single and essentially being married to the ministry, unless you're going to burn with passion, in which case you should marry. But yeah, Paul is gay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. We
Are you sure you want to claim him? Like, you could have let the straights have him. Like, it's like, how the bis have to claim Joseph Stalin now?
Ooh.
It's like that vibe.
I
You
mean,
know what I'm saying?
I don't want him on my team, but we've got other terrible people on our team. Like, it's going to be what it's going to be.
I mean, it's just like, the Jews, we have to claim Harvey Weinstein. We have to claim Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, see,
and
like, this
Adam
is part
Levine.
of
Like,
this is part of equality, Gavi. You got to take them as they come, kind of thing. So the blogger that put this all together went a step further. I'm going to go a few steps beyond what he did, but he thought that perhaps Jim's desire to go into such a dangerous mission was kind of a Hail Mary for acceptance from God. It was, the blogger implied, and I don't think he was wrong, maybe what was in Jim Elliot's mind was, well, if I go and I die, I am free from this sinful desire. And if I go and I live, maybe I will have done such an extraordinary thing for God that God will reward me by taking the desire away.
I feel that deeply. I feel like I've been there.
It broke my heart.
Yeah.
So growing up as fundamentalists, could you have seen, like, I don't want to say could you have seen yourself doing something, but like, can you wrap your head around that mindset?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Gavi, we were raised to die for
Wow.
Jesus.
And that's kind of like, it was, in retrospect, highly dramatic, but it was one of the things that was on my mind as I was a 20-year-old going to China. Was like, well, it's illegal to be a Christian, or it's illegal to proselytize in China, and so I might be thrown in prison, or I might I might be put to death, but it's for Jesus, and that's okay, because that's a higher calling.
And not just okay, that's almost like an ideal ending to your life.
Well, yes. But I also really identify with this idea of maybe if I do enough, God will take this thing away. And, we don't know what Jim Elliot's orientation was, or what his desires really were. I think we're making strong guesses, but I could totally identify with that idea of, if I do enough for God, then God will take this thing off my shoulders. So all of this tracks for me in a very personal way.
We don't take a hardline stance against speculating somebody's sexuality on this show, but we are very, very, very slow to do it.
Yeah.
And this episode is pretty out of the ordinary for us. I think the evidence is very strong, and I don't disagree necessarily with the blogger's conclusions. I think there's a strong chance that he's correct.
Right.
But I think there's a larger picture here, and this is where I want to go beyond like what we've read in these articles. I think there's something that's just orders of magnitude greater than two people potentially being each other's beards for evangelical Christian acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Even if both Jim and Elizabeth Elliot were heterosexual, cisgendered people, sorry to use a slur on our podcast.
My God.
It is abundantly clear that both of them had made sex and sexual desire religious to the point of absolute sexual dysfunction. And what happens when a person in that state is a major influencer of the rules for everyone else? What happens when somebody has spiritualized sex to a point that they are not able to, they see themselves as a monster, they see their desire as a monster, they beg God to cut it away from them, to purge them. When that person is the proto-influencer telling other people how to do Christian sex and Christian dating, what we get is toxic purity culture. And I think that the effects of this are the same regardless of whether we are talking about a repressed lesbian or asexual woman in a relationship with a repressed homosexual man, or just two incredibly repressed straight people in a relationship with each other. which one of those it was doesn't really matter. What matters is the repression and the effect that it had. So where this really does intersect with purity culture and queerness is I've heard a lot of stories, even recently, about people who grew up in purity culture and they always thought, like, wow, I am really nailing the purity culture thing. I am the best at keeping my purity because I'm an AFAB person and I don't have any attraction to AMAB people at all. I don't have crushes on boys. I don't think about boys. I don't even want to kiss a boy. Wow, my heart is so pure. I'm doing great. And then 5 or 10 years down the road, they realize that they're a lesbian. And that's why.
Yep.
And all of their friendships with other women are just like extremely intense and very fraught and just like.
And like they were never taught any kind of accurate information about their own body. So if they did have a physical sexual response to another AFAB person, they didn't know what it was. So it just never occurred to them. And this is an incredibly close mirror to my own story of having no clue I was bi, because why would I? So that is one thing that comes out of purity culture when it intersects with queerness. And I think we see a lot of reflections of that in the Jim and Elizabeth story, potentially.
I mean, the thing that I keep thinking about, because I've spent a lot of time listening to fundamentalist pastors preaching on sex and sexuality and temptation, as it were. I'm a straight man, and I've never once felt like, man, I like girls, but that dude over there is really tempting me. You know what I'm saying? But like the way that they talk about like gayness and the demon of homosexuality is that God will come in and God will tempt you with this demon, and you will be so like, it will be so hard for you to say no, but you have to hold on and really just like think of your purity or think of like Jesus in heaven or whatever. And so that's not like, if you don't want to have sex with men, that's not a normal thing to have happen. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, it's like we were talking about with Megan. Like, oh, straight women don't feel sexual attraction to other women. Oh, it's that kind of same concept flipped around. Like, no, straight people don't get tempted with the homosexual demon.
Right. And what I'm thinking through right now is like, so I dated women when I was still in the Baptist church and like doing the whole thing. I had a couple of girlfriends, and it's not that I was repulsed by them, but it was that ultimately I didn't want that sort of not just sexual intimacy, but emotional intimacy. Like it was harder to connect, and it wasn't what I was after. And so, like, I think we think about relationships and everything as, you know, what can I look at that makes me horny? And it's like, well, you know, maybe it's a little more nuanced than that. A lot more of it has to do with the mind, and attraction isn't just who's got great tits or a nice ass. Like, it's the person, or at least for me, it's the person. And ultimately, I was attracted to these women that I dated as friends, but it was much harder for me to build bridges beyond friends that like to hold hands or friends that like to hang out together alone. And so like that was part of my journey, was like realizing, oh, you know, there's nothing wrong with these people. It's not that I don't love them in a way, but it's not the same as wanting to be, you know, intimate with them and mated with them for a long period.
you know what I remember from when we were all the way back when we were talking about Jack Hyles in and the Battle of 1989, back in the first Family Fundamentalism, also Wizard of God, was he had that book where he was like, you want to have some emotional space between yourself and your wife.
Yep.
And you can't rely on her like emotionally or let her know what you're really feeling. You need to keep that space, that mystery between you.
Mm-hmm.
What I like, for me, like, that doesn't, like, sure, maybe you want to it seems to me like that's not something that, because even men who are like toxic about the way that they view women and will still want to use women for like emotional sponges,
Mm-hmm.
and will want to like emotionally dump on their female friends so that they can like and have them do the emotional labor of propping them up
Right.
and
And
having
that
that
even
emotional intimate, like,
often goes well into the territory of emotional intimacy, because like as somebody who's been in that position more than once, you get stories that really ought to be saved for somebody's therapist or partner.
or even just like the amount of like frequency that this stuff is coming out. Like you can rely on somebody, for if it's like a regular thing that you do, but like if it's like every day, you're like, I need to talk to you about XYZ. I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling like constantly. That's like,
Yeah, and then you've got Jack Hyles asking Victor if he can make Jenny his best friend.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
That is extremely interesting.
Allegedly.
And Jack Hyles is the exception. I'm tired of being nice to him.
he's like the exception that like proves the rule to everything, though. It's
But I think another question is, are Jim and Elizabeth Elliot a product of, are they repressed queer people who had no idea, maybe even that they were, maybe he knew and she didn't, or whatever? Or are they a product of the warped nature of purity culture and evangelical teachings on sex? There are so many questions that this brings up.
That feels like a Venn diagram that has overlap in the middle, though.
Yeah, true.
Like I think it seems likely that they were in some way not straight, and it also seems like that repression from fundamentalism kept them exactly where they were. There's not really a road out, especially what year was it? 1950 something,
I'd have to
when they
look
were
it up.
getting together. But there's not like a clean way out. And we've discussed before, this is their entire world revolves around this idea of going on mission for Jesus and saving souls, and like it's not about my personal fulfillment or happiness, it's about what I can do for the Lord. And so maybe they're repressed queer people, maybe they are just extremely damaged from this sort of purity culture, um, sex is the bad thing world that they were living in. But either way, like, I think both of those can be true, and both of those make sense for the people that we've been examining their own words today.
well, if you view yourself as like just a vehicle for the Lord's work, just like as a human, you are a vehicle for the Lord's work, then what do you do with a vehicle when it's worn out? You like, I guess you sell it, or you cube it, or and if there's something wrong with it, it's less valuable,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still a vehicle.
Yeah, it's still valuable in some way, even if you scrap it.
Right. And then, but you are literally just an appliance, and it doesn't matter like the whether or not you are successful, or whether or not your self-worth comes from how well you are capable of doing the thing that you are built to do. Like you could either be like a high efficiency washing machine, or you could be like an old, not very good washing machine. And why would somebody buy the old, not very good one, except for that it was cheap? And so you just devalue yourself.
Yeah, and if you have something that you perceive as a dysfunction that will limit your usefulness as God's appliance,
Then you lower your standards.
yeah, and you do everything you can to hide it because your entire self-worth is tied up in being a good appliance.
And if you're like, well, my wife isn't very attractive, but you know what? I guess I need a wife to do this thing. So like,
I need a cash car to get around town.
yeah, I'm gonna buy a Geo Metro.
Oh God.
If you're rocking a Geo Metro in 2023, I respect you. I respect the hell out of you.
Honestly, yeah. No, that concept of I am just an appliance actually like really resonates with me, because I think in a lot of ways when I was doing missions work and leading up to that, I was trying so hard to be the appliance that God could use to accomplish whatever he wanted. Excuse me. And my own wants, needs, urges, desires, whatever, were became secondary because I was doing this higher mission that was so important for the world and for God and all these things. And so, yeah, like in a lot of ways, I could see that sort of being a way that you devalue yourself, or take some of your own humanity away. That makes a lot of sense to me. It's not
I
good,
just
but it makes sense.
no.
Just to be
I've
clear.
just been like kind of turning this over in my head about how you get super deep into this God take away my desires thing. Hang on. I'm looking something up because I want to get the lyrics right. Heather Heath had recently posted a video on TikTok about like what was your mission song. We all had like that one song that made us really like ready to go.
Little children,
Right. Well, that was hers,
are
evidently.
falling into a burning hell.
It took me a couple days to be able to come up with mine. I had to look up the song list of this super old hymn book that we had for reference. It was the Moving Up to Glory Land quartet songbook that this was in. But I finally found it, and I want to read you some of the lyrics. Let's see. Take my houses and lands, take my dreams and my plans, I place my whole life in your hands. And if you call me someday to a land far away, Lord, I'll go and your will obey. And whatever it takes to draw closer to you, Lord, that's what I'll be willing to do. And whatever it takes for my will to break, that's what I'll be willing to do. There's this concept of like eradicating not only desires that are seen as sinful, but eradicating desire at all that almost seems like twisted and co-opted from Buddhism. That I think like the fundies would never want to admit that, but it's like a highly toxic version of the idea of like the less that I desire, the less that I need, the less that I want, the more enlightened I can become. But it's like this horribly toxic and painful version of that, where the more I deprive myself, the more I excise pieces of myself that want anything at all. The more I fast and pray, the more I give up luxury so I can give more money to the church, the more I give up my time, the more I work to not feel anything that's sinful and only feel approved emotions, then the more righteous I am. And that's seen as kind of a goal.
The thing that I've seen about that is, I mean, I know there are some people that fully and honestly and deeply buy into it, but just as often as not, you see people who buy into that because they think that's the thing that gets them the praise and attention and glory from other people. And that's what they're really desiring, is validation from other humans.
Yeah.
And that's what gets them there.
Because that's not like wanting validation from other humans is something that you can so easily pass off as, oh, that's not really something I ever wanted. You know, other people follow me and want to be like me, but I never asked for that. It's very easy to deny and pretend that that's not something that you want or desire.
And the reality is that getting validation from other humans is something that everybody needs and everybody wants. But it's almost like you can get that, but only as like a side effect of devoting your whole life to Jesus and devoting your whole life to God and being very right. Like if you do that well enough, that's the thing that follows that. So it's very twisted it's very kind of like backwards in that sense, which is also one of the reasons why I think it's so, you so often see that people don't really give each other the kind of validation that they need, or they're like Jack Hyles, where you're not allowed to have those close relationships where you could get that kind of validation because if you do that, then you might realize, oh, I can get this thing that I've been trying to get from God and that I get from other people when I give my life to God. I can just get that without going through steps A, B, C, and D. I can just go straight to step E and get that, which is way easier and honestly way healthier. I'm going to do that instead.
And it almost seems like that whole process is maybe what Elizabeth Elliot did. She experienced something that is genuinely tragic. Losing your husband at 29 years old when you've got a small child, I think that Valerie, her daughter, was like 8 months old at the time. That's tragic. But she went through this thing, and it was like a golden opportunity for her to be the martyr's wife, which is a part that she played for the rest of her life.
The martyr's missionary widow.
Mm-hmm. She won the Christian persecution game. She won. Yep. And she is still famous for winning the Christian persecution game years after her death.
Was Through Gates of Splendor like required reading?
Yeah, it was in my school curriculum.
Damn. That's crazy.
I wouldn't say for us it wasn't required reading. I believe I did read it years ago, but it was also one of just like ever present in the sort of psyche of people. Like it would have been the story of Jim Elliot would have been a sermon illustration. It would have been something that got brought up pretty frequently, and it was one of those things where, like, if you're interested in missions, you need to read this book, which ultimately is kind of weird.
Yeah, it was something you heard about even from being a little kid. Like even maybe in junior church or kids' Sunday school, they'd be telling you this story about, you know, the gruesome ways that they got speared to death by, you know, these horrible people who didn't want to hear about Jesus and all the other pejorative and
people.
Pejorative and racist terms that they would use about these people in isolation. But I heard this as a kid growing up in church, and then in ACE literature, this is one of the required books. Remember, I've told you about reading The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom?
Yes.
Because our literature was light on fiction, because Jesus. But I was reading, like, missionary stories were a heavily featured part of ACE literature curriculum. I read one about a missionary pilot who was taking medication to a remote location in Alaska, I think in 6th grade. And then Through Gates of Splendor and The Hiding Place, I think, are both 8th grade ACE literature required reading.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, because I went to public school, so we wouldn't have read Through Gates of Splendor. What
really?
we read, I think we read... No, why the like? Why would we have read? Yeah. Oh, you're joking. No, you know what I read in high school at one point was Heart of Darkness. Did you ever read that book?
No.
That book's crazy.
It is nuts. It's what Apocalypse Now is based on.
Yeah, no, like that book is like, oh, they're really just out here killing these people. This is like
and I was reading this book Through Gates of Splendor that, if I'm not mistaken, has actual photos of the guys' bodies in it.
No.
That's...
I'm pretty sure it does. I'm pretty sure there's like a, you know how like older books will sometimes have the pictures aren't printed in with the words, but there'll be a little, like 5 or 10 pages of pictures right in the middle, right?
Yeah.
I am pretty sure there were actual dead guys in my copy.
That is horrible.
I'm fine.
What was the movie?
I'm clearly completely normal.
Yeah, no notes.
There was a horror movie that they based on Through Gates of Splendor. I'm trying to remember what it was.
There have been a couple different movie adaptations. I don't know them all off the top of my head. I don't know. It's hard to say, like, you know, was who or what is to blame here. But this was such a big bombshell that I just didn't feel like I could wait till next Pride Month and do a whole episode on Through Gates of Splendor to get to it.
Right. No, I think this is an interesting angle. And I do think it's important to, like, talk about where some of these sort of cornerstones of purity culture come from. So obviously, Jim and Elizabeth were molded by the purity culture that they grew up in. But then Elizabeth turns around and sort of doubles down on it. And so noticing the impact of that, I think, is really important, especially during Pride Month.
Yeah, because I know that I've repeated this 100 times, but purity culture hurts everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a fact. But it disproportionately affects women and queer people. And there's this hierarchy to how much it is able to hurt a person. And the more queer you are, the lower down you are in that hierarchy. And the more it can psychologically damage you. It's not to discount the idea that purity culture damages straight men, straight women, because of course it does.
Sure.
Of course it does. It damages everyone. But it hurts women more, and it hurts queer people more. It's the same poison. It's just how big a dose do you get? And what it says. Sorry.
Sadie's metaphor corner, y'all.
Bingo.
Bingo. And there it brings up a lot of questions of what if the people who codified purity culture, the woman who codified purity culture for my generation and the generation before me, was what if she or her dead murdered husband were queer people? And what if they did bake their own absolute self-loathing in when they codified purity culture?
I mean, honestly, that makes the most sense to me.
It does. It does. You see the self-hatred in the way that they wrote about themselves, particularly Jim, but Elizabeth did it too.
I think about how homophobia is, in a lot of ways, just misogyny that's been placed onto men because they're not as masculine as society wants them to be. And
Sure.
I wonder how much of that like feeds back into what you're talking about here with Jim and Elizabeth hating potentially parts of themselves, and then that, you know, festering and festering and festering, and then, you know, how much misogyny is in there, how much homophobia is in there, like how much of those elements that are all interconnected are, like you said, baked in. There's that internalized misogyny, there's that internalized homophobia potentially, and so yeah, I think pointing it out and saying this is not cool like this is what hurts people is really, really important. And I think, and like I said, I think it's part of what Pride should be about, is calling out where we see people causing harm.
Yeah, and that's why I thought this story was worth bringing to the table to have this discussion today. Because it is just so much deeper than, oh my God, what if he was gay?
Right.
That's a fair question.
But that's the run and whisper to your friend because it's hot gossip question. That's not the why is it important question.
Yeah, why does it matter?
Exactly.
And I think in this particular situation, it matters.
Uh-huh.
So, Dinah, you always do this to me. You just get me in the space, like even if we're just talking on the phone, because we have been here on the phone too, girl.
That's true.
You get me in the space to analyze these things, and I am so thankful for you. And thank you for sharing with our audience, and thank you for being in my life, because I love you.
Oh, I love you too. It is an absolute pleasure whenever we get to talk. Sadie and Gavi, both of you. It's a lot of fun having you guys and sending you just horrible things via text message continuously.
Oh, it's definitely not safe for work. Our text thing is
our group chat is primarily weird Instagram targeted ads. That's most of it. Yeah.
And unhinged memes.
If our if our group chat ever leaked, it would like
would be like probably, so we're not as important as Jim and Elizabeth, but it would be much more salacious.
Oh yeah.
You know how I've always said, like, I have no desire to run for political office?
The group chat is why.
If our group chat leaked, I would be absolutely precluded from ever running from political office, which I have no desire to do, by the way.
I mean, my dude, George Santos is still technically in office. Noted drag queen George Santos. There's another one you got to claim, Dinah. Sorry.
George Santos follows the best of Grindr Twitter account. That's like,
oh my god,
I do not.
George Santos follows the best of Grindr Twitter account.
Okay, but the best of Grindr Twitter account is verifiably really funny. Also, Grindr, I'm not on Grindr anymore, but Grindr is a cesspit, and it is as bad as you think. Just throwing that out there. But yeah, we don't claim George Santa.
I really picked the right time to get out of online dating.
That's how I met my girlfriend, not on Grindr. I met her on Tinder.
Oh, I met my partner on Grindr. It's fine. I mean, in Paris. I
remember swiping past my husband on Tinder.
Oh, ouch.
Yep. I mean, he swiped past me too, so fair enough.
He lived downstairs from you, so you're maybe like, maybe I don't want to swipe on this guy that I.
Yeah, I certainly would not want to
get in the laundry room.
I certainly would not want to get into a fast and intense relationship with a neighbor that culminates in us getting married 6 months to the day that we met. That would not be good.
How weird would
and
that
now we
be?
have a child.
How weird.
So, let's finish up this episode. I've got a really nice, positive pride story that I've pulled for y'all. I wanted to thank all of our listeners who sent in pride stories. I think this is the first year that we got so many that we just did not have time to read all of them on the podcast. But I wanted to thank all of you so much. The range of stories that you sent to us were so incredible. We got poetry from more than one listener.
Could you post it somewhere, maybe? Could you post it somewhere, maybe?
We could. We'd have to get permission.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I may email some people whose stories that I really wished I could have shared and just couldn't because of time, and see if there's a way for us to put them as a free post on Patreon that everybody can see, or another way for us to host their stories. Because seriously, the stories we got this year were incredible, and this is the first year that we've gotten so many that we actually did not have time to cover every single one. But the one that I picked for you is from Bat, who uses they, them pronouns, and their story is powerful, fun. I think it's a good ending to this episode. And would one of you like to read it for us?
Hey there, my name is Bat, they, them pronouns. Fantastic, Bat. I guess it's good you're a bat they, you're not a Batman.
Oh my god. Delete your account. Are we going to
laugh at that?
Delete your account. Gavi, you're canceled.
Okay. I mean, come on. The joke writes itself. I've been listening to the pod for a while, and I've finally worked up the courage to send a story this year. You don't have to read this part on the air if you... I already read it on the air. I was raised Fundamentalist Baptist Church as a nephew. I like that term, nephew.
I like that too.
That works.
Yeah. Of the pastor. And while it wasn't as intense as all of your stories, I was technically allowed to watch TV, although my family knew I was watching anime, I would have gotten in trouble. They strongly disapproved of the music I wanted to listen to and applied a lot of shame, but didn't ban it outright. I do remember putting away or throwing away CDs after church camp multiple times. Bummer. But being ADHD and desperately craving stimulation, I feel that. I returned to them with much shame multiple times over. That sucks. I was married before I was legally able to drink, and dancing at our wedding was strictly forbidden. Surprise, surprise, 10 years later, I'm now divorced and living fully on my own and actually enjoying not being under the thumb of a controlling family or husband, and re-listening to episodes of yours discuss patriarchy and control in the home has been a great comfort to me in this troubling time. Fantastic. Glad to hear you're living your best life. Hell yeah. Anyway, on to the pride story. Back when I and my then husband were living in California, he worked as an independent contractor playing music with the band for church services at an evangelical/non-denominational Christian church that rented out a room in a school as their meeting place. We were still in the process of deconstructing and also leaving the church, but both of us were still too deep in to cast it off fully. We didn't like his parents' church, but the preferred one was too far away to really get to every week. So this tiny meeting of half a dozen couples was nice and homely. I was working for a supermarket mega chain that shall not be named, and they had finally relaxed their dress code to allow for colored hair. This will be important. Naturally, wanting to express myself, having finally realized that I was allowed to be something other than a cishet girl, I hit up my friend who was going to cosmetology school, and he gave me a pompadour faux hawk dyed blue, pink, and purple.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Me up. Pompadour faux hawk. Sadie, you should get a pompadour faux hawk.
Their hair is so good. Like, the whole reason I wanted to read their story is because they sent us a picture of their hair, and it is so good.
If we like blur your eyes out, can we post it on Instagram? We'll post it on...
I will email them and ask if they would mind if we posted their hair.
Hell yeah. I'm
Also, a pompadour faux hawk dyed blue, pink, and purple is the most I'm not a cishet girl hairstyle I can even imagine. I love it.
Hell yeah. It's fucking cool. It's sick. Naturally, starting incredibly soon after that, the pastor mysteriously began preaching from the pulpit to this group of half a dozen seniors and elderly about how awful it is to be gay, that gay people are going to hell, society is normalizing queerness, and it's our job to love and pray for them regardless. Ugh. Throw up in my mouth reading that. I remember leaving church every Sunday in angry tears, but keeping it together long enough to smile and shake hands with everyone and wish them all well until next week. Oh, that sucks.
That does suck.
This doesn't really have a happy ending, besides eventually the church shut down because we moved out of California, and the pastor did too. Wow. Ugh.
I mean, progress.
Yeah. But I'm glad to be out of there now and truly living the deconstruction life, no longer forcing myself to go to a church that hates me out of a sense of obligation. Hell yeah. Thank you guys so much for what you do and for listening to my story. Much love, Bat. Yeah, Bat, rock that dyed hair. Yes. Rock a pomp, rock a fade if you want to, rock an undercut. We're all about it here. Be queer.
Dinah, I texted you a picture of their hair just so that you can see it, either now or when we get done recording.
Yeah, dude.
Oh, wonderful.
Bat's hair looks...
It is fantastic.
Oh, that's fancy. I like that.
Primo. Hell yeah, that's a good dye job.
Very nice.
Yeah. The blue...
Congratulations,
the blue
Bat.
sets it off, man.
Absolutely.
All right.
I think I hear a chuckster.
Yep, our other co-host is up, so that is our time for the Leaving Eden Drag Brunch. Thank you again, Dinah, for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, it has been a pleasure.
It's always amazing to have you. We'll have to have you again on sometime, and just like maybe when we do more mission stories or something.
We've been doing like twice a year. Maybe after we cover through Gates of Splendor, we can go back and do another round of those mission stories that we didn't get to.
Hell yeah.
That's a thought. Through Gates of Splendor, decompression episode, and mission stories.
That would be good. I think we could also figure out potentially there are 2 movies about this whole story. So at least 2 movies. So there could be a compare and contrast. I don't know.
Oh yeah. Something. Because you were a film expert.
I wouldn't say expert, but I did go to school for it.
Dinah, do you have any social media you want to promote or anything?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Dinah House-Fire, TikTok at Dinah House-Fire 1. I don't really do much over there. Twitter, I'm also at Dinah House-Fire, and I'm on Facebook as Dinah House-Fire. It's DINAH, house like a house, -fire like what burns.
So it's a hyphenated name. So
yes.
So
just on Facebook.
Liberal.
So it's the firehouse and the house was the 2 families that.
Yes.
I mean, it would be, except I'm a drag orphan, so I raised myself. So I don't come from the House of House and the House of Fire, although the House of House sounds really funny, and I might have to do.
The House of House sounds like, honestly, like a pretty good club. I would go to the house.
Yeah, like the HAUS of HOUSE. That would be fun.
I'm going to a party at the House of House. The House of House music.
House of House.
It plays only deep house.
Oh, God.
Only deep house, loud house, house, firehouse.
House. What? You just turned into Flula, and it's fine.
I don't know. I watched Zoolander the other week, and I'm just like...
Okay. Zoolander is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Zoolander f***ing hits.
And that's as someone who is apparently a movie expert. It's just perfect for what it is.
That movie's...
It's not trying to be other than what it is.
It's so funny. It's funny. Unbelievable. Like, it's I cry every time I watch it. It's...
Merman Pop. Merman. It's such a well-written, stupid-ass movie.
So hot right now.
I would like to reassert my absolute love for unpretentious, dumb movies. Nothing else is quite as comforting. And you can follow me on social media on Instagram at Sadie Carpenter Music, on Twitter at Hell Yeah Sadie, and on TikTok at Sadie Carpenter 1.
And you can follow me on, I guess Instagram's the only social media that I do. Now that I'm a cis-het man, and I can't say that I'm a cis-het man on Twitter or I'll get banned.
For slurring yourself?
For using a slur against myself. It's hate speech.
I hate it.
I'll get banned for hate speech for saying cis-het. No, I'm on Instagram now mainly. That's the place where you find me. It's at GAVRIELHACOHEN. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.
But old rolling river of time, you've healed me in too many days. No regrets, no confusion. Decided to change my ways. I'm so thankful I decided